Welcome once again. You're flying along on the sales pipeline. So grab your board, catch a wave, see what the latest is in sales pipeline growth and development from the master, the surfmeister himself, Mr. Matt Hines. How are you doing?
I'm good, Paul. How are you?
Good. Where are you surfing today?
So we're surfing from San Francisco. Boy, is it a beautiful fall day down here. Down here for the first stop in the ABM Ignite Tour. There's a number of companies that are involved in account-based marketing, account-based selling that are putting on a short little road show here in the fall, starting in San Francisco this week. If you're listening from Boston or New York, you can join us next week. And the week following, you can join us from Chicago, home of the world champion Chicago Cubs.
Boy, I never thought anybody'd say that in my lifetime here.
Well, I thought it was, as a lifelong Cubs fan, I alternate, Paul, between being an optimist and a fatalist. And there were many moments of oscillation throughout this playoffs, as well as in the 5 hours of that game last night.
How about when they called it for the rain, tied in the 10th inning here? Oh, my goodness, here.
How does suspense get any worse than that for Cubs fans? I mean, you blow a 3-run lead, you're going into extra innings, and now there's a rain delay. Anyway, my week is spent the whole show today just talking about that. If my voice breaks, it's because of that game last night, staying up a little too late, celebrating with some friends, and then getting on an early flight this morning down here for this event. But excited to be here. Thanks everyone for joining us here today on Sales Pipeline Radio. We are live every week at 11:30 Pacific, 2:30 Eastern. With topics throughout the world of sales and marketing focused on B2B sales pipeline growth. You can find all of our past episodes at salespipelineradio.com, as well as subscribe to our podcast at Google Play and the iTunes Store. And we've been featuring guests and experts from throughout the sales and marketing world, but very, very excited for our guests today. Jim Ninivaggi, who is the Senior Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Brainshark, and spent a number of years before that really as sort of the voice. I don't know, Jim, I call you the voice of sales enablement from your time at SiriusDecisions. I don't know if that's fair or not, but hey, you're the guest of the show. Might as well make you sound as impressive as possible. But Jim, thanks very much for joining us today.
Hey, Matt Hines, it's great to be with you. And I guess I was one of the voices. Well, let's say that. And congratulations to your Cubbies. As a lifelong Red Sox fan, I feel your pain and your joy. It is a great feeling to get that burden off your back. So, congratulations.
Well, thank you. What's funny is, since last night, I've had a number of people congratulate me, and I did nothing but sit, drink beer, and pace back and forth behind my couch last night. So if I did anything to support the team, I guess that's good. But yeah, no, I think I talked to a lot of Red Sox fans last night, and a couple Indians fans as well. Joe Paluzzi, who runs the Content Marketing Institute, is a good friend and was certainly pulling for his hometown Indians. And they will have their day. A couple young teams last night. But Jim, I know we could probably spend the whole half hour just talking about baseball, and that would be super fun. But those that are listening in live and those on the podcast probably want to hear us talk at least a little bit about sales enablement. So I can't think of anyone better. And you can be as humble as you want, but I can't think of anyone better to talk about sales enablement with than you. And I guess I want to start with sort of where did all this come from? Where did sales enablement evolve from? Did this really just come out of sales operations? And kind of how did we get to where sales enablement is today?
Yeah. So prior to joining Brainshark, I had the opportunity to actually launch and run the sales enablement practice at SiriusDecisions, a research and advisory firm focused on sales, marketing, product. And I'll never forget the day that John Neeson and Richelle came to me, the two founders of SiriusDecisions, and they said, "Hey, we want you to run the sales enablement practice." I said, "Fantastic. What's sales enablement?" I literally 6 years ago, I really hadn't heard the term. The way that I've been very fortunate in that I've had a front row seat to watching the development and evolution of the function, and it continues to evolve. I think if you ask 10 different people from 10 different companies to define sales enablement, you're likely to get 10 different answers. But looking back, 6 years ago, I would say it was more a function in marketing. And it was focused primarily on that, what I call the content problem, right? Companies have thousands of pieces of content. Marketing's creating all this great content. they're sending it to sales, and they lose complete visibility. They don't know what the reps are using. They don't know what the reps are not using. And on the sales side, you had salespeople saying, well, I can't find anything when I need it, so I just grab what I like, and then that's what I use, right? So the function evolved primarily in marketing to start to solve that content problem. And, that's where you saw the rise of the sales content management software players, companies like HighSpot and Savo and Isentera, which is now Calidus, Seismic. Over the years, as first the term and sales enablement became much more common in organizations, you started to see it begin to evolve into more than just content. I think companies recognize that, hey, yeah, it's great that our salespeople can find the right content when they need it, or better yet, the content's finding them when they need it. But a deck is just a deck. It doesn't become a presentation until you have a really talented salesperson who's able to convey a message that's on target to that buyer. So you started to see the evolution of the function more towards starting to evolve to a broader aspect of training, onboarding, and more focused on sales effectiveness.
Talking today with Jim Ninivaggi, who's the Vice President of Strategic Partnerships at Brainshark, and spent a number of years really helping to sort of evolve and shape the sales enablement space for B2B companies. And, you raised the question of who owns this function. And I think if sales enablement has any legacy in sales operations, sales operations has traditionally been a sales function. What you're describing in terms of more prescient access to content, more of the right content, and even providing sort of training, coaching capabilities. I mean, I could easily argue that that's the purview of marketing, especially if marketers are focused on increasing conversion of their leads and just generally providing more support through deeper into the pipeline. What are you seeing? I'm sure you're seeing people on both sides. Do you have a preference? Is there pros and cons to marketing or sales owning sales enablement?
It depends on the organization, and what I used to tell my clients when I was at Sirius is it really doesn't matter where it resides as long as it's clear in its function and it's clear in how you're going to measure success. So I've seen it, and we at Brainshark we recently did a study to find to see where is the function residing today, and I'd say it's split. You see it. It's because and the trend is less in marketing, frankly, moving more into operations, sales operations, and then what we're seeing actually is it coming out of operations and becoming its own function. So you've got sales operations, sales enablement, both reporting into the chief sales officer. But what's really important, I think, and when I look at where the function is today, regardless of where it's reporting into, I'm seeing that it is focused in three key areas. The first is, what I'll call sales talent optimization. So it's responsible for hiring of salespeople, onboarding of salespeople, the continuous development, transformational efforts, things like that, and really owning that entire life cycle from recruiting right through retirement. The second area is I'll call it sales asset management, or you can call it sales content management, which is that, okay, we've got to do a better job of helping our salespeople find the right content when they need it so that it can find the buyers when they need it in their buyer's journey. But assets, I use the term assets because it could be content, or it could be, using a sales engineer at the right time, or using a resource like an executive briefing center, and making sure that that's all coming to the salesperson at the right time. And then the third area that we're seeing, and this is probably in a minority of sales enablement functions, but I call it sales communications management, and that's where they are managing all the communication coming from corporate. So you think of a large company where the salespeople have to sift through hundreds of emails. That's a huge productivity drain. Mm-hmm. So the function is basically becoming almost like a filter, if you will, managing all the communication coming from corporate, which includes emails, which includes the product updates, so that the reps aren't getting 18 product updates at the same time. So basically helping to manage the communication so the salespeople are getting what they need when they need it, and also making sure that they're getting it in a way that they can digest it.
We're talking about sales enablement here on Sales Pipeline Radio today, and Jim, you mentioned some companies that are getting to a level of maturity with sales enablement, carving this out as its own function. I think that makes a ton of sense. I think for people that are listening, if you've been taking notes, I'd encourage you to go back and sort of put a check mark next to those different key areas that Jim just talked about. And if you're not taking notes, go back and listen to it again. I think no matter how you organize, organization is a little less important in my mind than function, right? And so addressing those functional areas to help the sales team be more effective, more efficient is really what's most important. Before we head to a break here, Jim, I want to talk a little bit about the idea of sales productivity as a function of sales enablement. I mean, literally helping the reps spend more of their time actively selling. And I know active selling time is something that you've put a lot of focus on. I heard you talk a lot about it during your time at SiriusDecisions. How important is that as a component of sales enablement? And, in a couple minutes before we got to take a break here, what are some things people can do to start to put a focus on that in the organization if they're not doing it already?
Yeah, so in productivity, there are two levers you can pull to improve productivity. You can make reps more efficient, which is all about giving them more active selling time, to your point, but also making sure that if they're not doing active selling, that they're at least doing high-value activities like their pre-call planning, researching their accounts, doing training. And you want to minimize or eliminate low-value activities like doing expense reports or having to redo the same proposal over and over again because there's not a more efficient way to do that. But the second lever is effectiveness, and that's really where enablement needs to focus, they need to own, and that's all about making the salespeople better at those high-value activities. So making them better at, understanding what to research, how to prepare for calls, and then making them the best that they can be on every interaction, whether that's an email interaction, phone interaction, web conference interaction, or face-to-face call, that salesperson has the knowledge, the skills, and the key processes to maximize that interaction.
Great. Well, we're going to have to take a quick break here. We're talking today with Jim Ninivaggi, who's the Senior Vice President of Sales Partnerships at Brainshark. We're going to talk a lot more about sales enablement, talk a little bit about how companies like Brainshark fit into that, and lots more when we get back from the break. Thanks very much for listening. This is Sales Pipeline Radio.
In a world where the speed of innovation and change in B2B marketing has never been greater, the only thing bigger is the need for clarity, for a blueprint, for a guide to what's really working. And how about a way to apply it specifically today to increase sales pipeline growth, velocity, and most of all, conversion? That's what you'll find in the Modern Marketer's Field Guide. And amazingly, you can download it for free. HeinzMarketing.com, just like it sounds, HeinzMarketing. It encompasses the entire sales and marketing cycle, but in quick bursts with lots of specific, actionable ideas, strategies, tactics you can put to work right away, like today. The loaded table of contents helps you narrow in and tackle a problem. And it's something you can come back to over and over again as a reference guide. Why not download your free copy of the Modern Marketer's Field Guide? It's free. HeinzMarketing.com, just like it sounds. HEINZ Marketing.com. Okay, back to Matt and his guest.
Jim and I were just talking during the break. We're just gonna talk about baseball for the rest of the time, Paul, if that's all right with you.
That's okay with me. It's an amazing year. I'll tell you, you got two teams that haven't been there in 1,000 years, and either way, it was an amazing story.
It was. Now, we're going to talk a little more about sales enablement here with Jim Ninivaggi as we come back from break. I want to encourage you, Jim's been sharing a lot of great ideas. Definitely take advantage of the recording of this show that will be available on SalesPipelineRadio.com in just a couple of days, and you can always catch every episode on the podcast, as it is available every day in real time at Google Play and the iTunes Store. Join us next week as we're live again Thursday at 2:30 Eastern, 11:30 Pacific. You will have a guest host, Paul. You're not going to have to listen to me. I will unfortunately be predisposed at the Inbound conference that HubSpot puts on in Boston, but we'll have Robert Pease, who runs our pipeline performance group, and he'll be talking about lead management, lead scoring. If your company doesn't not necessarily have a lead problem but has a conversion challenge, an opportunity. We'll be talking a lot about best practices around lead opportunity, lead conversion. I want to pick up where we left off, Jim, on the sort of the sales productivity side. A company called HighSpot, which I know Brainshark is partnered with, and I want to talk about that as well. They did a study earlier this year to try to identify areas where sales reps spend more time than they maybe should when they're not selling. And the three biggest areas of non-selling time focus were, number one, time in CRM, number two, time creating content, and number three, time searching for content. Now, that third one was actually pretty surprising to me, but, given your time in the field, even your time at Brainshark, I'm sure that, you see examples of all three of those on a pretty consistent basis.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the creating content and searching for content, again, goes back to that legacy of, why the sales enablement function was created in the first place. But also spending, that too much time in their CRM. The issue there is, that they're spending too much time in what I would call low-value activities. If I'm in my CRM system and all I'm doing is updating my forecast, and I'm updating my pipeline, and I'm updating notes, but I'm not getting any value from that, it's not helping me sell any better, then that's a low-value activity. You can make it a high-value activity, however, if you are embedding, and we can do this with Brainshark. You can embed right into Salesforce the learning that salesperson might need to prepare for a call. You can provide them with the guidance on how to do a really effective pre-call plan, something that I'm always shocked. I'm always shocked how few companies actually have a structured pre-call planning process. And also, within the CRM, you can start to gather analytics around content usage, both with that content that's being consumed by the salesperson to make them better, but also the content that they are activating with buyers to move that buying process along. And you mentioned our recent partnership with HighSpot. We're really excited about that partnership, and one of the key reasons is they have terrific analytics that will enable our clients who are using Brainshark and HighSpot to essentially get a 360-degree view of that content, both from what's being used to enable the salesperson and also what content is being used effectively to activate with buyers.
We've seen, across the board, the issue of content continues to come up as a stumbling block for a lot of organizations overall. I've seen stats that say as much as 90% of content created for sales goes unused, and so I think a lot of companies are saying, well, let's create, 90% less content. I don't know that that's the answer, because if you start to create the same content for everybody, like generic content for all these unique buyers in unique roles and situations and even stages of the buying journey, that unique, that common content won't necessarily work as well. So it seems like the challenge here is content discovery, making sure your reps have a process for how to get at that, and then knowing through that analytics package which content is working, which isn't, so you can throw out the bad and do more of the good.
Absolutely. I always say that if you want to fix the content problem, you do when I was in sales, you do how they handled content back then. You printed it. So I'm going to give away my age here, but, I sold sales training for what used to be Xerox Learning Systems back in the early 90s. And I was working out of a Manhattan office, and we had something that we called the sales closet. And it was just a bunch of, cubby holes where we got our content. So you go in the morning, right? And depending on, who you were calling on, if I was calling on a financial services company, I'd pull down the case studies from financial services. If I was calling on a pharma company, I'd pull down those case studies from the pharma company. I'd grab my, the latest white papers and my product spec sheets. And we had maybe 90 pieces of content to choose from. And marketing knew what we were using because it was the stuff that we were reordering. So they knew what we were using and what we weren't using based on the reorders. And, life was simple back then. Mm-hmm. You fast forward to today, you need a very large sales closet to fit most of the, what companies are producing today. It's not uncommon to see organizations that have, content libraries in the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, for their sales organizations. It is about the content, but it's also about making sure, and we use that word activate, and it's kind of a fancy buzzword, but it really, to me, activate means I can take the same presentation and deliver it differently to two different buyers. And based on my understanding of their needs, based on the persona, just based on the nuances of the personalities that I'm talking to, I can make that presentation much more impactful as a salesperson because of that. And that's the effectiveness part that makes the activation, that's where the magic happens. It's making that content relevant to that buyer. A deck is just a deck, right? It doesn't become a real presentation until that salesperson brings it to life for the buyer.
Well, and it's more than just that customization of content, right? I think the format of that content tends to play a role as well. I mean, just related to, I don't think we shared this. And Paul, I don't even know if we told you this, but I was at a conference a couple weeks ago and, literally was just sitting at a random table for lunch, and someone looks across and says, "Your name sounds familiar. Hey, wait, do you have a podcast?" And she pulled out her phone. And in between the Wall Street Journal podcast and something literally from Howard Schultz at Starbucks was Sales Pipeline Radio on her podcast. She was the CMO of a pretty significant company that was listening to this stuff. So I think, audio, video, multimedia formats can certainly, help diversify the approach you take, and in some cases reach people that aren't otherwise going to be reached by our PDFs and other collateral. Jim, as we wrap up, we're talking to Jim Ninivaggi from Brainshark. They're doing some amazing stuff on the sales learning and sales training side. Definitely check them out at brainshark.com. Talked a lot about the things that people are focusing on related to sales enablement. Where are they not focusing? What are the things that people aren't looking at enough today that you think, especially as we head into the new year, that sales enablement professionals and those that care about the outcome of sales enablement should be paying attention to?
Yeah, I think certainly I saw this as an analyst. I'm certainly seeing this at Brainshark as a key use case for using Brainshark. And for those of you not familiar with Brainshark, we essentially give you the ability to create very easily dynamic learning content that you can deliver a variety of ways to your field force. So the typical use case when folks look at Brainshark, a lot of times it's about onboarding, right? That seems to be a hot topic today. I was recently at a sales enablement function out in San Francisco where we had 18 sales enablement leaders. I think 16 of the 18 named onboarding as a key issue. And that's going to continue to be a key issue. But I think what organizations really need to start thinking about is post-onboarding, that continuous learning that needs to happen. There's all this focus on, from day 0 to day 180 or 90 or whatever you kind of deem your onboarding process. And then, companies go, okay, well, we're done. You've been onboarded. Go forth and be productive. And it doesn't work that way. It typically takes a salesperson, depending on what they're selling and their tenure, 12 to 24 months to become really productive. So the thing I think that the sales enablement function and the sales enablement group as a whole needs to focus on is that those months between 12 and 36, because that's where you're going to see a lot of turnover. A salesperson comes into a company, they try it out for a year, and I'm not sure if I'm going to make the money I need to make, and they move on, right? And if you look at the turnover rates for organizations, typically 12 to 36 months is where you're going to see the highest turnover rate. And a lot of that is voluntary turnover. Reps saying, I'm not going to be successful here. And when you lose a rep in month 18, it's a huge cost to the organization. It's the cost that you've already invested into that individual. There's the lost productivity that they perhaps could have been producing if they had been supported properly. And then you really, and something that companies really don't think about, it's the lifetime value. So what could that salesperson have produced if we had been able to keep them? So when I look at, going out, for the next couple of years, that focus of continuous learning, how do we provide our salespeople with what they need in order to be successful after the onboarding, and also what do we need to provide our managers so that they can coach effectively? That's a key area for sales enablement going forward.
Yeah, amen to that. I think that your point about a systematic, ongoing means of training and coaching, our sales professionals is key. And I think it's not only for retention, but just for effectiveness, consistency, predictability of the results we need to hear and see. I think too many companies, get just fall into the trap of random acts of training and coaching. Well, we're out of time. I really want to thank our guest today, Jim Ninivaggi, who's the Senior Vice President of Partnerships at Brainshark. Definitely check them out at brainshark.com. They got a lot of good stuff. You can also learn more about their partnership with HighSpot on the content and analytics side. Jim, I was really hoping that we would see a Cubs-Red Sox World Series this year. Just thought that Wrigley Field and Fenway Park would be a lot of fun. But hey, we're only 150 days away from spring training. Not that I'm already counting. It's been 108 years since we won a World Series. I'm already looking for the repeat. Why not? Vegas already favors the Cubs, so we'll continue to talk a little baseball on Sales Pipeline Radio moving forward. If you want to hear more from Jim, you can definitely check out a replay of our show today on SalesPipelineRadio.com. You can also catch it through the podcast available at Google Play and iTunes Store, and then get a transcript, a shortened version of our Q&A that we had today with Jim on HeinzMarketing.com. Join us next week, Thursday, live, 2:30 Eastern, 11:30 Pacific. Robert Pease, our pipeline performance practice lead, will be talking about lead scoring, lead management. Until next time, until the next episode of Sales Pipeline Radio, this is Matt Heinz. Thanks for joining us here, Sales Pipeline Radio.
You've been riding along on the Sales Pipeline, surfing the latest waves in sales pipeline development and growth with Matt Heinz from Heinz Marketing.